Hi, welcome to Stories and Spoilers, the podcast. This is a special episode called Books for the Soul, where we highlight Black bookstagrammers, businesses, and authors. I happen to find an amazing book blogger who I will now be introducing. Chelsea, tell them more about yourself.
Hi, my name is Chelsea, aka Princess Peach Reads. I am an avid romance reader. I'm also an art teacher. I'm based here in Houston, Texas. Super excited to be here as a part of the pod.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Genuinely, Books for the Soul is going to be special episodes that really do highlight amazing, cozy book bloggers, authors, and folks within the, Black community. Because I feel like a lot of us kind of get hidden in like the Bookstagram community and like on BookTube as well. You really have to search for us. So I'm hoping that these episodes bring a cozy, comforting vibe, and you get to find new bloggers like Chelsea who have amazing accounts and share so many wonderful books. So in this episode, we're going to be going over a few things. We're going to go over some of Chelsea's anticipated reads of 2025, some of their favorite underrated books, and why they started their blog. So, yeah. Also, we may touch base on some of their favorite authors as well, who may have been already mentioned on the podcast. So, who knows? But just to do an icebreaker, what is one book coming out of 2025 that you're really looking forward to?
So Kimberly Lemming's gonna have a new book that starts like a new series. It's called The Time I Got Abducted by Aliens and Now I'm Trapped in a Rom-Com. First off, her titles are so awesome. Like they're so long and so funny. But I'm super excited about this one. It's introducing a new world. Her first series was, I wouldn't call it like medieval, but it was definitely like kind of older and like fantasy. And obviously, this one's still fantasy, but it seems like it's more modern. And so I'm really excited for this one. And the characters are all going to be different. The world looks like it's going to be different. It's aliens now and not like werewolves and
Mhm.
dragons. So I'm very excited about that one. I already pre
Mhm.
ordered it and everything.
That's amazing. I loved her book, That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, and The Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. I've done episodes about both those books, non-spoiler and spoiler. I want to continue with the series, and I did reference there's a Christmas novella that actually got a new cover recently that Chelsea
Ooh,
has. It is so
ooh, so
beautiful. It
pretty.
is a gorgeous elven individual holding a curvy, beautiful black woman in like a green dress. With this episode, you will have visuals as well. But for folks who are only listening, this cover is gorgeous. I highly recommend you check out Mistletoe by Kimberly Lemming because the book is short, it's sexy, it's funny, and there may or may not be a talking sword, which we were talking. Her name's Alexis, and she's a talking sword. These books are funny and they're full of like romantasy, which is a genre of romance and fantasy, which is like a perfect combination in my opinion. I don't know. It's like fries and ketchup. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
just goes together. Yes. So I also wanted to know what is one of your favorite book tropes?
Oh, that's a good one. There's so many.
Yeah.
I think the one that stands out the most to me is slow burn, which is
Ooh.
funny because it drives me crazy. Like I just want them to get together and like it's all sunshines and rainbows. But I really like it when it takes them a while, when they really get comfortable with each other, when they get to know each other well. I was reading a book the other day and it was like I was 60% in before they even shared their first kiss, which like sounds crazy, but it was so good because there was so much time for them to like actually become friends, get to know each other. Speaking of which, friends to lovers is another trope that I love. And so it was just really sweet when slow burn is because they're getting to know each other,
Mm.
not because they hate each other and it takes them too long to get there. I like it when it's just like, oh, let's get to know each other, let's develop this friendship for each other, and then we'll see where it goes.
That's how I feel about Friends to Lovers as well. It's kind of grown on me. Even like a second chance romance, it depends on why they broke up. It depends on why they broke up.
Yeah.
But if they broke up for like a mysterious reason, like it's not quite clear, like the partner plot with Christina Forrest, where they break up in college and it's
Mm-hmm.
not quite clear where they broke up. There was a misunderstanding. They meet up again as adults and they kind of fall back in love. And you were always the one, like the one who got away, and they were
Mm-hmm.
friends and they later became lovers. There are certain tropes that like get me in a chokehold. Like
Mm.
what is it? I love the take care of you trope where like one of them gets sick
Oh,
or like something bad
yeah.
happens and they have to like be there for each other. I adore that. Or in the case of Kimberly Lemming, when there's an adventure or like there's something they have to solve or like a curse they have to
Hmm.
break and they need each other to get through it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those
Banter.
are really good.
Yep. Yep.
Banter,
I
yeah,
love it.
no,
I
definitely
love
lots of
it.
banter. One of the things that you had mentioned was in the partner plot. They were in college, they broke up, and then they come back in
Yeah.
adulthood. I really like books that have that kind of transition. I just think, as you know, I'm late 20s. This is actually about to turn 30 this year. So excited.
Ooh, that's so
But I
cool.
really think that kind of like transition from like, oh, we started here in college and this kind of thing, and now we're in adulthood. I think it's just like it helps me get grounded in like the reality of it all more, of like, oh, like romance is one way when you're younger and
Mhm.
everything like seems like it's gonna go well, but things
Yeah.
happen, and then like it shifts into like this new perspective of adulthood. I really do like those kind of timelines. I'm actually reading The Roommate Risk right now. I'm listening to it on audio
Talia
by
Hibbert.
Talia. And so this is
Yes.
actually my first one. I have her sister series, the Brown sister series. I haven't read it yet. But Roommate Risk, the two main characters, they met in college, and there's like a bunch of flashbacks back and forth, and I've been really liking that, from adulthood back to college, and so I've been really liking that too.
What's funny is that like I'm really close to my mom and where she's a big reader as well. She actually read The Roommate Risk as an audiobook. It's on my TBR. I really do want to read it as well. I loved Get a Life, Chloe Brown, which is part of the series by Talia Hibbert, which kind of follows like a young woman experiencing a scary moment in life, and she realizes that life is super short, and she
Mm-hmm.
really wants to live her life to the fullest. And she makes a list of all the things she wants to do, and there's a cute motorcycle guy next door who kind of helps her with that list, and they end up catching feelings for each other. And Talia Hibbert is so good with writing about curvy Black women
Mm-hmm.
as well as like disability. And book two of that series, someone I think
Mm-hmm.
she's a chronic pain. I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if it was book one or book two, but one of them had chronic pain, and it was one of those things where like when people say like real life tropes pull them out of a story, I have to disagree sometimes because sometimes having a female main character or a male character who has um it's like actual things you also struggle with, be it like anxiety or family issues or like intimacy issues where they get
Mm-hmm.
nervous or they have like really they want to but they don't know how to communicate what they need or what they're not comfortable with. I like having those in books, especially when it
Mm-hmm.
has a minority as a main character because I feel like I can relate to them,
Mm-hmm.
and when they overcome something or they have a partner or a friend in the book who's really reassuring and loving, it almost teaches the reader a lesson on how they can approach things in real life.
Yeah.
So I don't know, have you really experienced that like while reading a book where you're like, oof, I really relate to the main character, even though it's getting real, I'm okay with that. Like this actually
Yeah.
adds to it.
So the thing that I think is the most powerful in that is it helps the reader empathize.
Mm.
There was an article that I was reading the other day that's saying like men don't read enough fiction, and so they have a hard time empathizing, like,
Ooh.
red pill and all of that nonsense. But basically, like, and it's so true. Like when we read these stories, and there's these diverse characters with all of these things, with all these personality traits or disabilities or what have you, it helps us be able to understand the world a little bit better. There's
Mm.
so many times where I feel like people say like, "Oh, this is too unrealistic," or like, "It took me out." Like, expand your mind a little bit, Like, if you open your mind to new things, new possibilities, you start to see the world in a little bit of a different way. So that's how I approach it. Even if I'm reading a book or a story that doesn't have that has representation of a disability or a person of origin that doesn't relate to me, it's helpful to like see that perspective. I also like reading authors that aren't just Black women or white women. That's, kind of most of them. But like I have a few books that have authors that are Indian women or Hispanic women. I'm like, oh, like I have this new perspective, and it's in a fun, engaging way. So I can start to kind of learn more or see the world a little bit differently.
That's amazing. I actually have been trying to do that as well. Like, I really do want to read more books by Black authors. Like, obviously, like, I love Talia Hibbert. I love Kimberly Lemming. but I also want to read more like horror and like sci-fi and books like that are written by Black authors as well. I'm really into that genre. But you brought up Indian authors, and since we were discussing friends to lovers, I actually have a book here that I recently interviewed this author because you just brought it up and it like reminded me. It pulled off my little shelf. So this is Match Me If You Can by
Ooh.
Swati Hedji. She and I were on the podcast together. She came on. I had to look at the book because like I keep saying her name wrong and I don't mean to. I annotated this puppy because I loved it so much. This is a radio, I guess like a radio star.
Mm.
And she really like loves doing like I guess like it's kind of like a mistaken identity where she writes to this person online about what's going on in her life, romantic things that she's trying to discover. And she has a best friend who's a bar owner, and his bar is kind of struggling. So she ends up trying to help him with social medias for that to kind of highlight his bar. It's set in India. He loves her family. She loves him. And they love each other as friends, but he always
Mm.
has saw her as more. And you discover that the person she's writing to online may or may not be her best friend and bar owner. And it's just kind of like it's an Emma retelling as well because she's trying to
Mm.
make an app where it helps you kind of match up with your dream person. And she's trying to help her friend like find the guy of her dreams. Meanwhile, she's like meddling a little bit and like what was supposed to be. So it's a modern Emma retelling. It's friends to
Okay.
lovers. It's a slow burn. Ooh, it's so good. Match Me If You Can is a really good book, and the author has another book coming out soon with a different romantic trope. And she has some fun books coming out in the next few years. So this book was so good, though. If you like Friends to Lovers and you want to read Indian authors as well as a slow burn, like this puppy is perfect.
I'm gonna have to try that one.
Yes, and it's so short. Like it's actually not that
Mm.
long. So I loved this book. But yes, I do relate to I want to read from a lot of diverse authors, but I also will say like there's nothing wrong with finding an author who's like who's a white woman and you're like, "Ooh, this story hits." You know what I mean? Like some of my
Hmm.
favorite books are by like women who look nothing like me, but the romance is so well written and there are some authors out there who write about women like Chinese women or black women who are the author is white, but the way they write the
Hmm.
story and with the respect they write it with I love it. Like Gianna Darling wrote a book called Caution to the Wind, which is part of it's part of a series, but
Hmm.
the book itself is like the most one of the most recent books in the series, and it has a female main character, and she is part of an assassin kind of group, and she's
Ooh.
part of a group for a revenge plot. She became part of the group because the group killed someone she loved, so she thought if she got in the group, she can find who organized the killing and then kill
Mm.
them. But the person she's in love with won't speak to her. So they're enemies to lovers. There's a taboo element, there's an age gap, there's a lot of miscommunication, and both of them want the same thing, but they don't want to work together.
Mm.
It's so, and it's spicy as hell. And it's so, so good. But Gianna Darling's a Canadian author, and she's
Mm.
so like creative and she's so like she writes spice so well.
Mm.
She's one of my diehard favorite authors, and I don't even care that like a lot of her books, people are like, this book's massive. I'm like, I'll read it. It's
It's fine.
okay. Yeah, if it's spice, I'll read that puppy in like 3 days. If
Mm.
it's adventure, is it just me? Or like adventure or fantasy, it takes me a really long time. If the
Mm.
book's massive, like Babel, I'm so sorry. That's gonna take me a while, you
Yeah.
know? Is that just me? Like when you look at a super big book, you're like, oh,
And
way
see,
back.
if I get it physical, I'm like, oh, it's gonna take way too long. But anything on my Kindle, it's just like, okay, time to just zoom through.
Exactly.
I don't know what magic you're
Yes.
putting in these things, but literally, like, so it's the
So
fourth,
big.
and I'm already 2 books down so far,
Ooh.
and both of them were over 300 pages. But like, I'm just like, but to be fair, I also don't really watch much TV, or if I
Mm,
watch TV, I might watch one episode, pause, and then like read a few chapters. So I don't know.
yes.
It might just be I have a lot of free time to read books.
No, I'm like I'm trying to I guess that's my always been my question for like listeners out there as well as for you. Like what what is an underrated book that you keep finding yourself coming back to? Like, do you reread books? And if you do you find that books are actually more fulfilling than TV shows and movies? Because sometimes I'll read a book, I can envision everything in my head, but then I watch the TV show and I'm like, I don't want the story to go in that direction. Versus with the book, I can almost like imagine what's happening in the story. I can rewrite it in
Mm.
my head. Like, does anyone else do that? Where they're like, the shows aren't hitting right now, so I'm just gonna find a book that I know is gonna hit exactly what it needs to.
Yeah, so an underrated book. It just came out this year. It's called Love and Bloom by Lucy
Ooh.
Eden. It is so good. So it's about this girl. She's a lawyer, and basically, or no, is she a lawyer? She's an agent. She's something. She's something like some big kind of job. And she like makes one little mistake, and she gets fired. And then from there, her jerk of a boyfriend who really is like moving into politics and wants her to be perfect, like they end up breaking up. Her grandparents die, and so she goes to this farm and she inherits it. And he's like, "No, you need to sell it." Like all of this, and she's like, "You know what? We should probably break up. I'm gonna go live on the farm." And then she falls in love with the farmhand. It's this whole thing, but it was just so
Mm.
wholesome and so good. And like it literally captured my attention from the time I got it until I finished, which wasn't that much time. Like I wish I was able to spend so much more time with it. I read it as an ARC, an advanced reader's copy, and then immediately as soon as it came out, or like I pre-ordered it after reading it, and then now that I have it, I haven't gotten a chance to reread, despite the fact that I want to. I lent it to a friend because I was like, oh my God, I need somebody else to read this book so we can talk about it, which I need to double check with her. I'm like, have you read this? But I know she was moving, so I'll give her some time. But that's one that I would like cannot wait to dive back into.
Ooh.
I don't know, movies and TV shows just aren't doing what I need them to do right now. I also don't feel like, as a romance reader, I don't feel like there's any shows or movies or TV shows that are romance that like capture my attention. There haven't really
Mm.
been too many good rom-coms lately, and there's never really been like a romance centered TV show. I mean, I guess you can make the argument for things like Vampire Diaries, that works, and that's like romanticy kind of, but like there's not really TVs and movies that focus specifically on romance, in my opinion, at least.
I mean, honestly, when I think fantasy, like romantasy, I think Arcane is probably the epitome
Mm,
of like a show that recently came out where I'm like, I use recently very loosely because it came out in the most recent season came out recently, but I believe the first season came out, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. Don't
mm,
quote me on that, but I know it's based off a video game, and then it became the TV show, and obviously, like as a proud lesbian, I love this sapphic representation. I'm vibing, but like. I feel like when I try to think of shows right now that have recently come out that like have caught my attention or like feel like I'm reading a book but it's really a show is also like Silo on Apple TV. That show has been
mm,
really good, like very good with like if you want like sci-fi,
mm,
mystery, a little bit of action, kind of claustrophobic as well. That show's been amazing. I know there's a Dune prequel that came out on HBO Max
mm,
as well. So if you love Dune, but you also want like that high fantasy, high stakes space witches vibe. I
mm.
know there's a
Ooh.
prequel for Dune. Yeah, like there's a lot of really good like, and I know some of these shows are based off books. Like Silo is based off a book. Dune
Mm,
is based off of the big famous sci-fi series. But
mm,
like sometimes I just want to read a book because I can visualize everyone in my head and I can also cast everyone in my head. Like I'm one of those people where like if you go on my Instagram, you can find some of the books that I read. I make celebrity casts because I
mhm,
imagine the characters in my head as certain celebrities. They mention certain characteristics and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I know exactly who would be that in a movie or a show."
mhm,
I'm doing that right now. I'm reading A Love Song for Ricky Wilds.
mm,
When I tell you I'm a very weird reader, I'm a mood reader, so I kind of read with the vibe that
mm,
I'm going with, but also I sometimes don't read hyped books because I don't want to get spoiled. I'm scared I'll go on social media and someone will put a spoiler review or they'll put a comment or a quote and just kind of
mm.
give everything away. So I try to wait till it's been at least like 6 months and then I read the book, even if it's
Yeah.
amazing. I will wait. I did that with Archer's Voice. I'm doing that with a love song for Ricky Wilde. I did it with the partner plot. I will
Mm,
literally wait until the hype dies down so I can read the book, not be spoiled, which is funny
mhm,
because I love spoilers. I love spoilers after I've read it, and I always give
mm.
people warnings before I do spoilers. Every episode, I give y'all a warning. But on Instagram, they don't always give you a warning. They'll just like
Yeah.
post an art piece about the book that's like a major plot element. And I'm like, stop it. Like, give me a warning. I haven't read it yet, you know? Also, I have been burned by hyped books. That's why I always
Mm,
ask people about their underrated books because a lot of underrated books end up being really amazing, but no one's talking about them on social media. And then they end up being great. It's just that no one's talking about them.
yeah.
Um, and then there's some books out there that are really hype. You read it and you're like, what, where, what happened to the plot of the movie? Like you're
Yeah.
like, what was the like for me, that was Fourth Wing. I know that's gonna sound horrible. I tried to read it. I had to DNF it. I couldn't. It had everything a girly would want. Dragons, a misunderstood female main character, a hot, dark, misunderstood male love interest, twists and turns.
Hmm.
You would think it would be like a cup of tea. No,
No.
ma'am. No.
And see, it's in my TBR. I actually, it keeps popping up on my Libby, and I keep just saying deliver later, deliver later. It's 25 hours on Libby. And like I don't do like the just straight 1x time. Like I have to do either 1.5 times or like 1.75. My sister's like, I was listening to something the other day, she could hear it. She's like, how fast are they reading? I'm like, I need them to go. But that's a really long book. And then there's also just so much discourse right now about like people's castings in their head for the male main character. And I'm just like, I don't want to like have the drama cloud me reading a book. So that might be one that I wait on and wait a little bit for the hype to die down before I dive
You
into
gotta
that one.
report back. Report back. Let me know if you like it. I feel like I'm missing something because everyone is crazy about it. And I was like, no, thank you.
Mm.
That's gonna be a no for me, big dog. And whenever it comes up, I'm like, oh yeah, fourth wing. And that probably makes me sound so fake. Like one of my friends has mentioned that, like, girl, you don't even like that book. Like, she doesn't even go here. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna bash someone's favorite book. I'm not. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing with like One Last Stop. I will die on this hill. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It was my first book I discussed on this podcast. It's a bisexual and sapphic female main characters. It has time warps, kind of like a misstep in time. It has
Mm.
spicy stuff. It has foodie elements. Like you have to eat the food to remember your memories from that time, which is
Ooh.
so cool. There is so many like such a for me it's a comfort read. I have a special
Mm-hmm.
edition and I have my original copy that has like all my it's my beat up version that I would take everywhere I went. It's like super ugly, but like it's mine. I it's one of those books where like I can think of a quote off the top of my head and I immediately
Mm.
feel warm and fuzzy and comfortable. And if it became a movie, I know exactly who I would cast, like for the characters, you know? The same author who did Red, White, and Royal Blue, Casey
Mm-hmm.
McQuiston, also wrote One Last Stop. So it has those same like rom-com,
Mm-hmm.
um, it was always you,
Mm.
banter, sexy elements, but the sexy elements are earned. So you really enjoy when they do get together because you can tell they
Yeah,
love each other a lot. Yes, yes.
I love that.
You know, it's a good book. I can't recommend it enough. And also, like, she is a little bit of a chunkier book, but you will fly through it. Like, you won't even
Mm.
realize it's like 300, 400 pages. Like, you won't feel it at all.
Okay.
So I highly recommend that. Plus, it has a mystery element, which I don't think most
Ooh.
people know, but there is a mystery in the book. Like, you're trying to kind of figure out the identity of a certain character. Um, and you do end up discovering later, which is so cool. And it's all set in New York, so the story
Mm.
feels like the city is a character as well.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Do you have any books like that where you're like, everyone should read this at least once, please?
oh, that's a good one. Let me look at my let me look at my little bookshelf.
Yeah.
Um, so this is gonna be silly, but I'm okay with it being silly. I think
Okay.
everybody should try. I don't. No, let me not say silly. I think everybody should try Ice Planet Barbarians at least once, just to see. So
Yes.
I am a monster romance girl. I think it's interesting. It's probably I read like Frankenstein and Dracula like when I was young, and then also like the Universal monsters, so like the Mummy and the Creature from the Black Lagoon and like all of that. So I've always been super comfortable with creatures, but these books are just so fun. And this is another author who can write like a diverse cast of
Okay.
characters. So if y'all haven't dove in, it's about these women who get stranded. They get abducted by aliens and then stranded on a different planet.
Mm.
And these big 7 foot tall blue men essentially like save them and they like fall in love, and it's like a soulmates type of situation, which is really
I
interesting
love
and really
that.
cool. It's just, I think it's a really good introduction into monster romance. It can be a little like jarring of like, what do you mean by monster romance? I'm like, I could go into this, but like this is a good place to start. And so yeah, this is one that I recommend to people. It's a really long series. There's probably
Okay.
about 20 or so books
Oh,
in the
wow.
series, and there's a lot. I've read most of
Ooh.
them on Kindle, and like these covers are like the new special edition covers,
They're so
which I think they're,
pretty.
it's really gorgeous. I think they're up to like the eighth or ninth book, like reissued in this cover. But yeah, I think these are like really fun. They're really quick. This one is just over 300 pages, but it goes by pretty quick, and there's just so many characters. If one character doesn't do it for you, you can find one in this series that you really enjoy and you really
I
enjoy
love
the
that.
dynamic. So I suggest this series to people. And then yeah, that's kind of, that's my good,
Okay.
like everybody should try this at least once.
Okay, if we're going into monster romance, which I get it, it's not a joke for everyone, but like I love it. If we're gonna go with monster romance, hear me out, hear me out. I'm gonna have to say Lady Venom takes a mistress.
Ooh.
Hear me out, hear me out. It is so good. So you can find it on Kindle. The cover looks like I don't own a copy because it was on my Kindle, but it's like
Mhm.
a black cover with like black snakes all over it, and then the text is like a red kind of color. So Lady Venom, it's set in like I don't know, like I guess somewhat Bridgerton times, somewhat, but in a
Okay.
small town, like a small village, and there's this big Gothic castle, and this woman, I use that word very loosely. She uses snakes and like she uses like the creatures around her in this dark wood and in her castle to protect her castle. But the men in the village outside the area are constantly like trying to get into her castle and kill her.
Mm.
There's this whole like tale about her being cursed and all that. And one woman one day she's supposed to get married, and this tall tale that like the creatures have killed young women on the village, and like Lady Mistress is like always trying to find like a woman that she can kind of take as like it's oh, they have all these horrible stories about her. And long story short, the main character is supposed to marry this guy she does not want to marry. She ends up running into the woods. She's like, I'd rather be attacked by these snakes than to be with you. I choose the bear. Like I'm not gonna be with
Right.
you. And then Lady Venom ends up protecting her and bring her into the castle. And the love interest begins to discover that Lady Venom has other interests in her as like a partner.
Mm.
Sexual awakening. Well, I also love the sapphic elements. There's also a vampire in the story, but like she's not the main
Oh,
character. She's
okay.
mentioned. So I think she's gonna be in another book, fingers
Mm.
crossed. But Lady Venom straight up is like, I only have so many times that I can use my power to protect others before something bad will
Mm.
happen to me. And long story short, like you realize there's a reason why she's been doing everything she does. And there's a lot of spice, there's a lot of yearning.
Oh,
It is a little bit of a creature element because she
okay.
has like her powers in her eyes and the way she transforms is very like it's very like serpentine, almost like
Mm.
Medusa somewhat.
Okay.
Like just the element of that. Oh, it's so good. So like Lady Venom takes a mistress. It's one of my favorite like
Ooh,
monster
I'll write that one
romances
down.
I've ever had. It is so good. And I've only read it on Kindle. I don't know if it's a physical copy, but if there is, I would totally get it. There's another one that involves witchcraft somewhat. It's set in modern day. I don't know if it's the same author. I don't think it is. It's called She Came from the Swamp. Um, and okay, so I know people hear swamp and they think Shrek, but this is not the case. She Came from the Swamp is about a young woman who recently lost her grandma, and her grandma used to live in like New Orleans pretty much. And the girl goes back to her grandma's house and she lives in this like little cottage near like the swamplands, and it's very like hidden away. And each person in her family has like a power, and it is set in modern day. It's not super high fantasy. Her powers are already established. She sets up like a little totem with like candles, and she's able to control her dreams and kind of maneuver through her dreams. And her grandmother would always leave like food or like snacks into the swamp for the creature who lived there as like an offering to protect the land, to
Mm-hmm.
protect her house. And the main character also does that. She's like a bodybuilder and stuff. So she ends up like leaving food out there. And long story short, the creature in the swamp ends up being like a super hot woman, and she ends up like showing up in the main character's dreams a lot. And then she'll wake up and she'll
Mm.
see like swampy, like watery feet like in her house. She'll be like, it's just a manifestation. And then you discover, no, 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 she's very real. And her family is kind of being rude because they want the house and it's all this stuff. But it's a
Uh,
super short book. The creature can transform somewhat into her human form, but when she's in her
okay.
all natural form, she's like got green mossy hair and like
Ooh.
it's just so cool. And it's very like self-aware. There's a lot of
Mm.
humor. Um yeah, I love it. It was so fun. So I was like,
Oh,
she came from the swamp.
yes. I'm gonna have to try those. I haven't found any sapphic monster romance, so I'm excited about that.
Yes.
Which, speaking of sapphic romance,
Ooh.
so I just finished reading Sunny Disposition and Team Players by Deanna Gray. And so
Yes.
now I'm about to read Outdrawn, and I'm so excited. Outdrawn is her sapphic romance. It's a workplace romance, which I really
Ooh.
like, which is really funny because I love that trope. But in real life, I'm like, no, I'm not
Don't do
dating
it.
somebody I work with. But I'm super excited. It's they work at I believe it's like a comic book company or like a graphic design company. So
Ooh.
they're artists. And there's like a little bit of a rivalry there. So I'm super excited about that one. But there's actually a couple of sapphic romances that are coming out this year that I'm super excited for. Um, so Flirting Lessons by Jasmine Guillory, which I actually am
I
about
have an
to.
arc. Oh my God.
Oh, then
Oh my God.
you're gonna have
Yes.
to tell me how you like it. I have
Yes.
Drunk on Love right now, and this is my first physical book of the new year that I'm reading. But I'm like, okay, I can't wait for Flirting Lessons to come out. And then there's another one that I keep seeing called Love Mechanic. I think it's by Carmen Lee.
And it's like two people and they're like leaning on a car.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
I know what you're
keep seeing
talking
stuff
about.
about that one. And so I'm excited about those. I think that's also
Ooh.
another thing, another goal, at least for this year, is to try to find more sapphic romances.
Her, if you ever want sapphic reps, like and like recommendations, come my way. I read so many. If you want a sapphic romance that has basketball, like the vibes of love and basketball, but adults,
Mm-hmm.
and more communication, you want sapphic vibes, adult, love and basketball, black representation, masc and femme, and one is controlling and one's very like free flowing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's giving NBA. It's called Love and Sports Ball. It is so good. Oh my God. It's like the cover is like two women with like their knees like touching and they're both sitting on the floor and one has a basketball, the other one's like touching the other and they're staring at each other's eyes and it's animated. It's so cute. They okay, so one girl, she is at a bar with her sister
Mm-hmm.
and she ends up her sister's like, "Hey, you're gonna work for the NBA in a few days. You've been working towards this for your whole life. You're gonna be a physical therapist. It's giving just right with Queen Latifah and Common.
Mm-hmm.
If you know, you know." So she's gonna be a physical therapist and I think she's also gonna be like a coach. Like I think but she mostly does physical therapy. That's what she
Okay.
does. She ends up, it's like her day before she starts her big job. So no one like knows that that's her job she's gonna have. She goes to the bar, she's looking good, and then this cute girl like comes up to her and she notices her right away because she's already a famous NBA player.
Mm-hmm.
And the main character is not really stressed about that. She's just trying to have a good time. But she's also kind of like, oh, I have work. I should be focused on that. And then her sister's like, "Ayo, live your best life." She's like, "Oh, you're right, you're right." So then she ends up having a one night stand with this famous basketball player, thinking nothing of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then she realizes that she's going to be working with that famous basketball player.
Oh,
And
I
then,
love that trope.
yes.
The
And the
hookup and
basketball
then
player
like,
has a rep as like a player, but she's not actually a player because she has no privacy. They keep like following her and her girlfriends and stuff,
mm,
but she has no privacy, so she's not actually a player. But that's kind of her reputation, and it's
mm-hmm.
hurtful. So like she ends up meeting her. There's a miscommunication on that end, but it's so good. My girlfriend has my copy right now. but I love that book. I want more sport like sapphic sports romance because that puppy
Yeah.
was so good. But yes, Love and Basketball. If you're looking for sapphic rep and you like sports and you like I want you, but not right now. I want you, but not right now. That's like the vibe.
Okay.
So yes, yeah, Love and Sports Ball is so good. And then I know you mentioned Friends to Lovers. So I actually have a book my girlfriend recently got me for my birthday, and I cannot wait to read this. It's called A Little Kissing Between Friends. So it's
Mm,
super cute. It's I want to say one of them is in music and the other one is a single mom, and they were really good friends and they end up having a friends to benefit situation, but it becomes
okay.
more. And we have Curvy Wrap, and I know
Hmm.
it's a little bit, I think it is a little bit of like a slow burn. They're both really upfront too, and I like stories where like they know what they want, but it's more so about like, is it the right time?
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to rush. I like a good story like that. So sometimes I do read the back of the books to give a little bit of a description. So this one is, and I always say people's names wrong, so I'm so sorry. Music producer on the rise, Cyan Thar the Star, knows what she likes. From her sickening beats in the studio to her flirty femmes she fools around with, her ever-rotating roster has never been a problem, until her latest fling clashes with Juicy, her best friend and the most popular dancer at the strip club Sanity. It makes Sin see Juicy in a different light, one with far fewer boundaries and a lot more kissing. Jaleesa Jones makes great money dancing the early shift and spends most evenings with her son, her Sanity family, or at Sin's house. Relationships are not a high on the priority list until she's forced to admit that maybe a friendship isn't the only thing she wants from her bestie. But hooking up with her ride or die is risky. Juicy isn't just Sin's best friend, Juicy is her muse.
Oh,
When Sin lays down her tracks, it's Juicy she imagines in the club, throwing it back to every note. If they aren't careful, this would crash and burn. But isn't real love worth it?
that sounds awesome.
And this is from the same author who did Devon and Chris Plan a Wedding, which was the like sapphic, I think like fake dating situation. They
Mm,
had to like get married and like kind of like fake date, but they ended up falling in love.
as always.
Yeah, it's all fun and games till I say I love you, girl, and it's like, oh my gosh. So yes, I cannot wait to read this. I just like I whenever I see like books where like they end up as friends, but they were like always low key in love with each other. I'm a big softie for like it was always you. And they
Yeah.
like run down the street to their house and they're like it was always you. I love that. I adore it. Do you have any books where you're like right now you're like, "Oh, I cannot wait to read this right now." Like the romance, I know it's gonna get me. Give it to me
Mm,
now.
probably Outdrawn. Like now that I've finished her those other two, because those are like my first two books of
I
the
love Sunny
year. Like
Disposition. I loved that
it
book.
was that book was so good. I'm just thinking, I was like, I feel like I'm like the train's been going and it's been going well. So I
Mhm.
think this is about to be a really good book. I'm also, what other books have I been super interested in reading? Okay, so I'm trying to get started on my Kennedy Ryan journey. I
Yes.
started with the basketball series, the shot series, like hook shot and all the things.
Yeah.
And so I did take a pause on, I think it's hook shot is the first one. There is the one trope that can get me to not finish a book the fastest is a pregnancy trope, and it's
Oh,
not the whole entire book, but I just had to like, you know, steel myself for it. And
yes.
so now that I remember, I'm like, okay, there's gonna be a child in this book, and it, like a child. She's not pregnant for the whole book, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back. But yeah, I want to get through that series and then the rest of Kennedy Ryan. So I have, this is book two. I don't know what this series is called, but
I
this
don't know
one
either.
is
I've seen
This
it
Could Be
though.
Us. I know the third book is coming out this year, and then there's the one book before that. And I've heard nothing but good things. So I definitely want to dive into these. I also just kind of want to get into physical books. I rarely read straight from the book. I'm an audiobook or an ebook girl. It's just convenience. I can throw my Kindle in my purse, pull it out, read when I
I
need
hear
to.
you.
One thing I'm trying to commit to doing this year is only buying trophy books because I've bought so many books that I'm just like, oh, I'm just so excited to get back into reading. I'm buying, 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 and then I didn't really love the book, or I DNF'd the book, and it's like, okay, now you have all these random books that you don't actually want. So now I'm trying to focus more on like reading the ebook or an audiobook and then buying the physical
Mhm.
copies as trophies that I would probably still reread. But just knowing that it's a little bit harder on my time and on my schedule to read a physical book, I need to slow it down a little bit. But there's some books like I'm just going to read them. I'm just going to buy them. Kimberly, Lemming, like we already talked about, I'm buying physical copies. Like I already know that. I don't need to know if I like the book. I'm gonna love the book, so I'm gonna get it.
I'm sorry, this is my cat Midnight. He's
Hi,
blending in with my
bud.
clothes, but you if you see ears, like black ears, like in the corner, that is my co-host Midnight. Sir Nanai. Yes, he just wants to be
Oh,
here. He wants to be included. If you look really close, you can see him like Nai.
hi, bud.
What's that, buddy?
So it's
Yes.
funny. I have three, and two are literally right beside me and behaving. The cat, and then the dog. She's sitting on the back of the couch in the window. And normally she would be like, who are you talking to? And why are you not talking to me? I don't know how we lucked out right now with her being chill. Normally, when I'm in
Listen.
class, I'm like on Zoom and like they're just walking by, and I'm just like, oh, I'm so sorry. So we lucked out right now. They're like, let's let mommy have her time.
You know what? It's the vibe. They said, you know what, Mom? Your book choices are actually kind of hitting, and we're gonna let you shine. Let her have her moment, you know? As what is it, as Guillory said, just let her cook. Just let her
Let her
cook.
cook.
Like, you know what I mean? That's my thing. Whenever people say like I try to describe books to people, and I've had friends be like, that doesn't sound good. I'm like, if you read it, you'll understand. Like it's the same thing with Kimberly Lemming for me. When I was trying to describe her series, there's a dragon, but he didn't mention he's a dragon. How did that not come up? She didn't ask him, so it didn't come up, you know? He's a werewolf with a dairy allergy who falls in love with a cheesemaker who wants to feed him a grilled cheese. Man eats that, no problem. 2 seconds later, he runs off to poop in the woods. This is a romance. It's part of the plot. Even like the love potion element in book two, where it was
Mm.
like she didn't want to sleep with him because she's like, it's the potion. You don't really want me. He's like, from his point of view, he
He's
was
like,
like, "This is
no.
true love. I do love you, girl. I love when like the love interest in a queer romance and a straight romance. I don't care if one of them is head over heels,
Mm.
like obsessed, unhinged. I love it. I love it. I love a dark romance. I love rom-com. I love sapphic coming of age. I love like all sports romance. If one of them is a die hard, I would do anything for you, golden
Mm.
retriever. Also, I'm just gonna put this out there because no one said it, but I recently had this idea. If a golden retriever is like the bubbly light love interest who would do anything for you, for me, a dark romance is like a black lab where they would
Mm.
like, I'm gonna hunt for you, I'm gonna kill them all. Like no one touches her. No one. Like that's for me, that's like book one of that time I got drunk and saved a demon, where he had the ring around their house, and if anyone came
Mm.
near the
Mm-hmm.
ring, he was like, so we didn't invite you over. And if you come over, I'm a dragon. I will literally blow you up. Like, and she's like, he's joking. He's like, no, I'm really
No, he was
not.
so ready to set stuff on fire.
Even in book two, like when Bree came to their house, like I think she just wanted to talk, and he was like outside with his like braids in his hair, and he was like,
Mhm.
"Hey, why are you here? Like, why are you here? Like my wife's inside. Why are you here? I don't want to hurt you, but like we didn't know you were coming over. Like I just love that. Even him being like, "Yeah, she told me that you're gonna come over, so like you can come into the magical premises, I
Mhm.
guess, but like don't come over next time." So that's just the vibe. So I loved it.
Call
Um,
first
yes,
or
even when
send a
like
pigeon.
I swear, like I've been waiting to talk to someone about that series because I love how like in book one of that, like I think she's mentioning to her family like how dangerous she is, like he is, and how she was running through the woods and she met him when he was like
Uh-huh.
chasing her down, and she was like, he's tall, he's got long black hair and muscles and big beautiful eyes, and like don't get sucked in, and then he's at the door and he's like, hey, hey, heard you
Hi
talking
guys.
about me. Sorry, I almost killed you out there, like. I'm kind of going through like a spell right now, like, oh,
The world of that series was just so good. Like the world building and like why the spell was there and how it connected to
yes.
book two. And then I know you said you haven't gone to book three
I
yet, but how
haven't.
it
I
connects
want to
to
know
book
about the silver
three.
dragon, the older guy who is the silver dragon, and like listeners out there, these are like light spoilers, but like there's a dragon in the third. He's mentioned in book one. He's mentioned in book two. He's constantly trying to sleep in book two. People keep waking him up for him to do things for them, and he's like, "I'm literally just
Dante.
trying to rest." Like, oh my God. And he's part human, part dragon, but like he controls like storms.
Mhm.
Long story short, he hasn't had a mate. Like he hasn't had anyone in thousands of years. He's kind of like done with it. Like it'll happen if it happens. Book three, I heard is his book. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm fighting for my life. Like I have 35 physical books I'm trying to read. I cannot. I cannot. But then my heart is like, she's coming out with a new book. I have a gift card for Christmas. Oh God. And next thing I know, it's 100 books. Yes. I'm
So I
cooking my books. That's my groceries.
yeah, for real.
Yes.
So I will say, it is the third one is my favorite in the series. I'll say that. I am a known blabbermouth, so I will not say any more. I don't want to spoil it. It's
Okay.
my favorite in the series. I'll leave it at that.
Ooh. I'm gonna add this series under the category of romance by Kimberly Lemming because we do mention it a few times. The series is called Mead Mishaps, so I'm just gonna include it as that because we do kind of touch on all the books, low key. And I also added Mistletoe because even though it's a novel, Alexis the Talking Sword does pop up, so I love to hear it. Also, I would love to know Alexis's like human form in the series because she always discusses want to have a romance of her own.
Hmm.
So I would read a book where she
Yeah,
became human.
and her first mentioning, she's like, "Oh, like take me to go see all the man butts." She's so crazy. So it would be really cool if like somebody was able to transform her into a
Yes.
human and like follow her story. I'm just so excited. There's as far as like monster slash fantasy
Mhm.
romance, Kimberly Lemming is killing it in that department. There's another author that I've been like super into. I just read one of her books. Literally, I think
Ooh.
might have been my last book of last year. Do, 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 do. Oh, Jessica Cage. So it was I accidentally summoned my demon boyfriend. It's
Ooh.
really, really good. And this year she's coming out with I accidentally hooked up with a vampire. I think it's coming out in like March or so, but she's another one who has like her world building is just so cool. So in the first one, where she summoned her demon boyfriend, she was reading like it was a love spell from a book, like a book. And she was talking to her friend.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, like I need a man, and like these dates have been terrible." And so she gets drunk and goes home and reads it. She's thinking like, "Oh, it's just a book." Well, she performs the spell. She doesn't just read it. She like does the steps, and then this demon
Mm.
man comes and she's drunk and they hook up and she's thinking like, oh, silly dream. And then he comes the next day like, hi. And she's like, no, like that was a dream. Like we were
I live
playing
here now.
you did a spell. And basically, because she summoned him, all of the demons from his world that like don't like him were going after her.
No.
Yeah, and so it was like basically he had to take her back with him to his world. And it was just like so vivid and so descriptive and so interesting. And the creatures were really cool, and the other characters from his world were really interesting.
Hmm.
And so that one was really great. So I'm excited to see if this new one with the vampire ties into that world. Is it a separate situation? Because I don't think vampires were mentioned in this last book. So I don't know if this is like a continuation or a separate thing, but it was really good. And so, yeah, I'm really because I am such a big monster romance girly, it's also really exciting when it's like a black female character, main character written by a black woman. It's just like, oh yes, and it's so interesting because it's like using our vernacular, but like it's monsters. I'm like, this is so exciting because it's so few and far between that it's like
Yeah.
monster romance. So that gets me super excited. So I'm really excited for that
Mm.
one.
That like with this book series, these episodes, Books for the Soul, I really do want to highlight how important it is to have representation of like Black female main characters, Black male love interests, Black queer relationships, because when we
Mhm.
don't see the representation, like for example, if I think of a vampire series that recently came out that has Black female main characters and is set in the 1920s, I'm pretty sure it's This Ravenous Fate, which my partner
Mhm.
adored. Um, I can't tell you how amazing it feels as a vampire fan to see shows like Interview with a Vampire where Louis is Black, which makes
Mhm.
sense because he's in New Orleans. Like it makes sense. Even like reading books like that, I just feel like more often than not, and I've mentioned this before, like in Twilight, you have a Black vampire and then they end up getting killed off, they end up becoming villainous, or they're a side
Mhm.
character. They're never like a main character.
Yeah.
And their stories are always so short. And it's nice and it's so important in fantasy and contemporary romance, in my eyes. It makes me feel so seen and it makes me feel so validated as a
Yeah.
reader. It just sucks to have to like change the physical description of every character you read because they don't look like you. They don't by any means sound like you. And you're just kind
Yeah.
of like, oh, like I can't tell you how many listeners and friends I've had who've told me I read books and I just swap out the physical description in my
Mhm.
head so that I can actually become invested. Um, but I also do a series on this podcast called Bookish Confessions, where people can anonymously tell me
Mhm.
their opinions, and then I put them on the podcast. And I've had a lot of people tell me that they don't read Black romance because, in their
Hmm.
opinion, it's not always as well written. And that's why they end up reading the same authors over and over again. Sarah J. Maas. Oh, who said that? Oh, so they end up reading the same author over and over again because they feel like Black romance is not that well written. Uh, Listen, an opinion is an opinion, but I will say this. If you only read one book and you base your entire opinion off a genre
Right.
off one book, then you're limited. Then you're so like, how do you feel about that? Because I've had people share like there are no good Black romances out there, and I'm like, really? Like there are though. Same thing with like queer books. So like, oh, there's no good
Mhm.
like, oh, they're all like this, and I'm like, you've only read one though. Like, how would you know?
And so that's why I think podcasts like this are so important to get people who read like the wide range. I think right now one of the biggest issues with book talk or bookstagram is like people are talking about the same books over and over, but
Yeah.
not going past that. Like truly, as much as social media is great, walk into a bookstore and just like
Mhm.
look at the shelves. There's so much diversity out there, and there's
Yeah.
so many books that are like incredible. And to like pigeonhole an entire community into
Mhm.
like, oh, Black books aren't written well. What books are you reading, friend? Like, truly,
Yeah.
since writing books, Black books have been written well. So like that argument's not gonna fly with me. And that's definitely a thing. It's like you gotta
Oh, oh no. I'll pause here. Sorry, listeners, we had a little bit of a tech issue, but we were touching on the importance of diversity in books and how it's important to widen the authors you read. Like even the author we keep mentioning, right? Kimberly Lemming. She's a Black author who writes amazing romantasy. Dina Gray, she writes really, really good, like contemporary romance. Another
Mhm.
Black author who's wonderful, Kennedy Ryan, who a lot of people know from This Could Be Us, Hookshot, which is a sports romance. There are just so many authors out there who write really good romance who are of color. Like Talia Hibbert, you may know from Get a Life, Chloe Brown, who also wrote I think it's like Suspiciously Cute, which is like a young
Mhm.
adult one I recently got. And also Christina Forrest wrote The Partner Plot, which is a contemporary romance and is so good with the Green Sisters, which is an amazing series. There are just so many books out there right now that like some are hyped, yes, I agree. But sometimes the books deserve the hype.
Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean? But as a reader, that's up to you to decide. But Chelsea, you were saying how like it's important to widen your horizon, go into a bookstore, even online bookstores. If some for some
Mhm.
reason going into bookstores can be overwhelming, a really good online bookstore that's Black owned and women owned is Jay's Bookshop. They also do baked goods, so they'll like if you get a book, like a book box. Those
Oh, oh,
Jay's House is a great like online bookstore if you're looking for Black owned, women owned. They have a lot of discounts as well, and they have
mhm.
sweet treats if you get like a little book box. I did that with my Ravenous Fate and another
Mm,
Black vampire book. They sent me like this beautiful velvet cookies, really good like
ooh,
little like marshmallows that were super delicious and vegan, I believe, as well
ooh.
as the book box had like a bookmark that had like things on it. It was so cute.
And see, I
So
think I saw that particular book box. I was like, this is a good one. And I feel like the price was really good because it was two books
yeah,
and a lot of
two
treats.
hardcovers and baked
Um,
goods and bookmarks.
yeah, that's really awesome. So there's another bookstore that I love that's here in Houston. It's called Kindred Stories.
Kindred
It's in
stories.
historical Third Ward, Houston, which is awesome. They have like it's the cutest, tiniest little bookshop. But also they have an online shop, tons of books. They also have events, which they have like book clubs, but then they also have like artist talks or author talks at different places within the Houston community, which is really cool. So yeah, looking up like Black owned bookstores is also a really good option. I just think it's crazy that people could say like, oh, I don't know, they're not written well, or oh, there's not, enough for me, or well, I can't see myself in these books, so like, I don't know if I want to read them. It's like, how do you think we feel reading like everything else and we still read it? Like, you'll be fine. And I think
Sometimes you just have to do that. You know,
and
you have to
mhm.
diversify.
And I think a big trepidation might be like, oh, well, am I welcome in this space? Like, of course you are. Like, of
Absolutely.
course you are welcomed into reading books about people that don't look like you. Like, that's, of course, like you can celebrate in that with us. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited that I found these authors, particularly that are in the monster fantasy realm, because it is like, I grew up being a little weird Black girl that really loved, her little monsters and this and that. And it's just like so cool to be able to have books that reflect my interests.
Mhm.
We're not a monolith, we're all different,
No.
we're all diverse, we all have our interests. And so, monster romance, sports romance, is so nice to be able to find books within any genre that I want to read that are by Black women that, like, are it's a little easier to connect, or like the language and the
Yeah.
verbiage that they're using like is reflective of like how I talk to my friends and family.
Yeah.
And so that's just been super fun. Getting back into my love for reading and like finding these new authors that I'm just like, oh, these are gonna be like my ride or dies.
Honestly, like there was a book that my friend recommended on another episode. Her name is Lauren, and she's so sweet. Lauren, I think it's Lauren Loves Books, or like Lauren reads a lot. She's wonderful. But she recommended a book, one of her favorite books of the year, and it's by a Black author, and it's by Kennedy Ryan. It's real.
Real.
I got this book buy one get one 50% off at Barnes and Noble. Once again, this is not an ad, but a girl loves a deal. Okay. And this book is a little bit of a chunkier boy, but it's my first Kennedy Ryan book. Um, like I said, hype. I'm a little scared of it, especially if I'm going to spend my money. I want to make sure that I am getting a book that really hits that spot. But I've had so many close friends recommend this book to me. It's a beautiful woman laying on like a throw blanket, and she's wearing like a blue dress, and she's staring at you like a Hollywood moment. And if I were to read the back of the book, it's once again, I say names wrong. So if I say this name wrong, it's like Resand Rice. I'm sorry. I will do my best. But Neva Saint is ready for the spotlight. After months as an understudy, it is her night to shine. She imagined he would watch in the audience. Kenan Holt, famous film director, fascinating, talented, and fine. Before she can catch her breath, everything is changing. Neva goes from backstage Broadway to center stage Hollywood, from being unknown to having her name on everyone's lips. When Kenan casts her as a star-studded Harlem Renaissance biopic. But forbidden attraction, scandal, and circumstances beyond Neva's control soon put her dream in jeopardy. Could this be her one shot, the role of a lifetime, the love of a lifetime? Cost her everything. And this book has a bonus epilogue.
Ooh.
I need to know what happens at the end of a book, but the reason I bought this book was not because of the hype, it was not because of the recommendations, it was because I realized that with hype, comes a certain level of this is your opinion. This book is amazing in your
Mm-hmm.
opinion. And I do want to kind of build my own opinion. So instead of running away from these amazing authors who probably have great stories, I'm going to make up my own opinion. If it's
Mm-hmm.
not for me, then I can always donate it. I can keep the receipt. I can return it. Like, listen, money is tight. We get it. There's no shame in returning a book. But I think there's something beautiful to be said when you find a book that has Black representation
Mm-hmm.
as a person of color and feeling seen, finding a romance that makes you kick your feet up, makes you blush, and even maybe makes you step out of your own comfort zone in your real life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just think that if you can find an author or a book like that that makes you feel like you close the book and you're like, your heart is full, you get the damn book. Like, why the fuck? What's the worst that could happen? If it's not for you, it's not for you. And if it
Right.
is, go for it. Um, Also, I always check books on Amazon before I purchase them at like a Barnes and Noble because sometimes at Barnes and Noble the book will be like 30 bucks, but on Amazon it'll be like 20 bucks, you
Yeah.
know? Also finding like used bookstores as well. Walmart and Target I know has really like a lot of sales on books as well. But I do say if you're okay with like investing your money a little bit, Jay's House, Kindred Stories, like you said, look at these Black-owned businesses because a lot of them are
Mm-hmm.
independent and they sometimes have discounts and you're able to kind of like two birds, one stone, get a book and support a small business.
Mm-hmm.
Barnes& and Noble will be totally fine. You know what I mean? If you don't get that book. Um, I will say this though, and I wanted to bring it up with you because I wanted to know if you've experienced this as well. I went to Barnes& and Noble last night. I was looking for a love song for Ricky Wilde, a very well-known book, pretty new. The location didn't have it. And I've gone to another location and they didn't have it. Barnes& and Noble, massive store. Um, and when I finally went to the back to look for another book by a Black author, it was all the way in the back, on the back wall and I had to really search for it. When I finally found it, it was $30 for a book that's under 200 pages.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, damn, I want to support Black businesses. I want to support Black authors. But is it just me or does it feel like Barnes& and Noble almost like tucks books all the way to the back? And they make it almost hard for readers to find romances like that sometimes. If they're not a big author, they
Mm-hmm.
sometimes kind of get pushed to the back. Have you found that a little bit?
Yeah, so in my Barnes and Noble, and I know the setup is similar across the board, the books like at the tables in like the middle of the aisles,
Hmm.
those are the ones that are getting the most hype, the most talked about, especially on social media. And even their end cap displays, which
Hmm.
might be slated towards, whatever holiday is coming up or like some kind of theme. But those are the books that like you'd be able to find these anywhere because it's
Yeah.
all anybody is talking about right now. And like, I get why they would put that easily accessible. It's a marketing thing. Like the books that people are talking about, they want, let's put them there. But when I wander to the romance section, and like, oh, like finally, here are the books like I want to actually sit through and like look to see what I can find. But
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, like some of these are hard to find. Like there's book one and not book two, or there's like a bunch of copies of this one book and none of this thing that I'm looking for. And it's like I'm not like how are y'all ordering books? Like what's the system for that? Like how do you know what
Exactly.
to order? Are you polling somebody? It can definitely be kind of tricky. I will say though, when I'm not buying from Amazon, which is just easiest, or independent bookstores, which a lot
Mhm.
of time get my pre-orders. I have a half price books right near my house, and
Ooh.
I really love. I'm an avid thrifter. My sister and I we do estate sales together. I love buying anything secondhand. It's kind of an adventure.
It's pre-owned and pre-loved.
Pre-owned, pre-loved, and so I really love going into used bookstores, and sometimes it feels like they have a better selection than some
Hmm.
of the big box stores, and it's also just
Okay.
kind of fun. It's like a little hunt, a little treasure hunt. Like for instance, I know I talked about Ice Planet Barbarians. This special edition copy was there. I was like, oh my gosh, like I was not expecting to be able to find this particular version.
Got you.
I've also bought quite a few gifts from half price books. And the nice thing is, I feel like a lot of the time somebody buys the book, reads it once, and then it's like, okay, time to donate. I'm like, this is almost a brand new book. They also
Yeah.
have a teacher discount, which I
Ooh.
use frequently every time I go. So, yeah, no, I love being able to find kind of adventures when it comes to buying books, savings when it comes to buying books, and then just
Yeah.
the ease of being able to find a book.
Sometimes like I've been to a half price book, some of my little brothers, they did not want to stay very long. They're like in their pre-tweens. They were like, I do not want to stay. But I definitely want to go back because I did see a lot of sales. I need to go thrifting for books. I feel like a lot of the books that I want, like if they're like, you know, sapphic and stuff, I do end up going to like a steamy lit. I went for the first time. It's a women-owned store. They have a few different locations, I believe. And it's all romance. It's all romance and it's so great. Dark romance, sci-fi, monster romance, indie, which was amazing. But like for me, like when I go into it, and also they had a box where it was like free books. So if you there was a
Ooh.
little box, if you it looked like a little locker. If you open the locker, it's full of like arcs and like free books that people it's open to
Mm-hmm.
anyone, which is so cool. Um but when I went to my location, it was the first time I'd ever seen a dark sapphic romance, a physical dark sapphic romance in a bookstore before
Mm-hmm.
by an independent author. I had never seen that before. And I've been to a lot of bookstores, and I was like, it it's such a good feeling to just see a book that you know is like what you want. Because if
Mm-hmm.
I can find it, that means other readers like me can also find it.
Yeah.
And that makes me happy. If it's accessible, it's a lot easier for people to open their minds. If it's hard to find Black romances that aren't by the big three, like the big names you know, it makes it hard for independent authors to kind of rise up because
Yeah.
they're overshadowed, you know? So it's a I don't know, it's like representation means a lot to me, but at the same time, I was so frustrated last night. Like there was another girl who also asked for that same book right before me. I didn't know her. We both asked for the same book
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't there. So and I'm like a friend of mine was like, maybe it's not really like people aren't asking for it. I'm like, no, another person even asked for it.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility, being able to get something easily sometimes is so important. But I will agree, in the case of like thrifting, sometimes it's nice to be able to just kind of go through them, and they're sometimes very gently used. So
Yeah.
it's not like you're getting like a beat up version, you
Mm-hmm.
know? But I'm definitely gonna check out Ice Planet Barbarians because I've heard a lot about it. And I love me a good like sci-fi romance, a little, a little spice or a lot of spice. I know
Mm-hmm.
the lore. The moment you brought it up, I was like, she's with me. Yeah, leave me alone, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
all the listeners are so sweet. But the last book I want to bring up is a book I got with the sale last night. I found one book I really wanted, so I was trying to find another book to get the BOGO. This is part of a series. It's book five in a series. I have not read the other books. Blasphemy, I know. I know you're supposed to read book one through four. I don't give a damn. If I can pick up one book in a series, I don't want to read 18 books. Sometimes I just want to read the one book.
Yeah.
Chaotic good. This book is called Taming Number Seven.
Number
It's
seven.
a hockey romance to my
Love hockey
knowledge.
romances.
I heard, yeah, this is a hockey romance, and the back kind of won me. Also, I was trying to get two books for under 30 bucks. I
Mm.
ended up only spending $29. I was like right there. And this book is book five in the series, but I'm gonna read it because it had the tropes that I like. So it says Toman's cheeky lad is this person named Gibbsy Gibson, is a comedian at heart. But underneath his happy-go-lucky nature lurks a broken boy, tortured by the events of his life, using humor to cope with his demons. Gibbsy hides everything from the world. Only one person knows who he truly is on the inside, his best friend's little sister, his Claire Bear. Enveloped in sunshine, Claire Biggs has spent her whole life adoring the boy across the street, her brother's best friend, seeing a side to Gerard that no one else sees. Claire is determined to tame her wild at heart childhood best friend. But when the unexpected occurs and the lines are crossed, will Gibbsy and Claire's friendship survive, or will it bloom into something more? Or will they lose themselves in the riptide?
Mm.
Okay, I love next door romance.
Mm-hmm.
I adore when it's like best friend's sister or best friend's brother. I do like that.
Yeah.
And I like a good sports romance. Like when they're like there's something about hockey where like they're on the ice and then he sees someone touch her, someone flirt with her, and he like bangs on the glass. It's like leave her alone. I love it. I love it. I've had a lot of people ask me like, "Girl, aren't you gay?" Yes, and I love all
And
romance. Yes, I will read anything. And don't think I don't see you girlies in the back who are straight but read male romances. I said what I said. So don't judge me. Don't judge me. So that's why for me, I'm like, read what you want. Read what you want. Okay.
yeah.
Don't shame people for their spice or their kinks or their favorite tropes because we all know there's a genre that you guys read that you probably wouldn't want to read in the daylight. You probably wouldn't want people to know about on your Goodreads. I see you. I see you see me. So it's like the Spider-Man pointing at each other. It's the same vibe. Like
Exactly.
don't point at me when I know what you're reading. So, but I can't wait to read this because like sometimes I need a palate cleanser that's just a sports romance, simple, like low stakes. Watch this end up being high stakes. Like watch this end up being
Probably.
like something super dark. But sometimes I just want to read a book where I low key kind of know what's gonna happen. Where he's like, it's not what it looks like, and the mean girl is in his bedroom, and she's like, how could you do this to me? Like, I sometimes I just want to read a book that's hella predictable and I know what's gonna
Yeah.
happen. Like, are you like that too? Or like you read a book and you're like, you know what? I want diversity, I want inclusion. And the next book you read ends up being like The Kraken Finds a Bride. And it's like, yeah,
Yes,
like sometimes you just need to read that too? But
for
do you feel that
sure.
or you read something super deep and like prolific, and then you'll like go back to your smut and you're like, home sweet home. This is my home.
So I tend to stay in romance and smut. Now, what I will say is I bounce between contemporary and monster.
Weird.
Because like I said, monster is my favorite. Like it just is. I
It's
like the little
fun.
weirdo. Like you mentioned earlier, like swamp monster, and you're like, it's not Shrek. I was like, but it could be Shrek.
It could be Shrek. Listen, it's like I've seen the memes about Shrek where he's like he had a home, he had a job, like he
You
they're listing off these things about Shrek, and
know?
I'm like, the movie. But listen, if it brings you joy and you're being respectful and your privacy, go off, girl, go off.
But yeah, I like being able to just kind of bounce in between, serious and not serious.
Hmm.
I feel like Monster Hunt typically is not as serious. There's definitely conflict there. I just
Yeah.
read one. Let me look. It's a sapphic monster romance. Actually, I
Ooh.
think that was my last book of the
2025?
2024. Okay, so
2024. Me
seducing.
already at the end of the year. It was your last book of it. Let's time travel. I'm like, damn, girl.
um Seducing Skyla. She's a octopus lady. Why do so many of these books start with abduction? Like I'm just now thinking this woman and other women got abducted and like they were on shipping crates and then there was a crash and now they're on this island. Long story
Ooh.
short, it's Greek mythology retelling, which I love.
I love that.
But yeah, this one was like it was very short. I actually got it on a stuff your Kindle day, but it was super short, super quick, really fun. A little bit of conflict, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, like it's a big problem that has to be solved. Like you said, it was a little bit like
Hmm.
predictable. I know how it's gonna end. Low stakes, it's great. So yeah, I have to do a little bit of bouncing back and forth between like
Okay.
stuff that's realistic and then like one that I have downloaded is like Alien Cowboys. Like I just have to go back and forth in between. It depends
Sometimes
on the
you need
mood.
to flip it. Sometimes you need to flip it a little bit. I will say this. Okay, are you open to romances that have like obsessive female main characters? Are you open to that?
Yeah, I could see. I will.
Okay.
So I will say my favorite trope, especially when it's like male, female.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, male, female. Is he falls first? Like I just think I
Ooh.
like that, but I can maybe do some obsessive female main character. What
Okay,
you
I
got?
think I think I can give you the best of both worlds. So he falls first times two. It's a poly romance.
Ooh, okay.
And they're all together. It's two guys, one girl.
Hmm.
And the two guys have feelings for each other, but they also have feelings for her. Sexuality is fluid, which we love. It's
Hmm.
called Eternally Devoted by Daisy Jane.
Okay.
Daisy Jane, if you're listening, you are the queen of spice. I love you. You're wonderful. I cannot wait to meet you one day at a bookish event and like ask you all the questions. But this is book three in the series called the Twisted Sister series. Yes, because each book is about a sister and they always
Okay.
live in the same house, but they they end up like moving apart pretty much. This is the oldest sister, and she pretty much
Okay.
raised her two younger sisters who are now grown up, have their own lives, have their own booze. She owns a jam business. She makes her own jams, and she works on like a little farm. She makes her own jams, and she may or may not be a serial unaliver, but she also makes jam. She's like super wholesome and Martha Stewart, but she also like sometimes people really piss her off, and then she'll like accidentally unalive them.
Uh-oh.
She's done it a few times, but she has reasons. She has reasons. And
Okay.
you learn about them in the series. Like it's not like she's just going out and doing it. Like it's these horrible people
Right.
treat her like crap, or they treat like an
Hmm.
animal like crap, and she ends up like getting her revenge with her little jar of jam as her
Oh.
weapon.
Oh.
She uses the jam as a weapon. It's very interesting. And
Ah.
one of her love interests is a cop, and the other one is like he works at the farmer's market pretty much.
Okay.
They both the two guys live together. They're friends and they low key kind of have things for each other,
Hmm.
but they're in love with her. Like both of them are in love with her, and they've been trying to tell her for so long, but they don't know how. And long story short, they end up finding out about her crime. She calls them and she doesn't lean on many people, but she calls them and is like, I don't know what to do. She explains what happened. They end up helping her. And I'll leave that at that. And
Okay.
it's called Eternally Devoted. It's on Kindle Unlimited because I love ya. It's on Kindle Unlimited. All right. For the girlies who are like, I'm not gonna buy it. That's disgusting. Give it to me now. It's on Kindle Unlimited. All right. It's on Kindle Unlimited. So that's book three.
Okay.
Book two is called Yours Truly, which is about the middle sister. She's a tattoo artist. She's kind of an apprentice right now,
Okay.
and she ends up caring about this guy who's a really famous tattoo artist who comes to her small town because he's kind of like going cold turkey. He's had a really hard
Mhm.
life. He's been a party boy. He needs to clean up his reputation. So he comes to the small town. His best friend owns a tattoo parlor. It's brand new, and he ends up living with him to kind of like get his shit together. He meets her. She's like, I'm not putting up with your shit. Like, I'm not doing this with you. And he's like, what are you gonna do about it? You're not gonna do anything about it. And she's like, actually, I will. And she ends up like she ends up telling her sister, she's like, he just needs someone to tell him what to do. He needs someone to tell him what he can and cannot do. And he's like, I don't belong to anyone, but I low-key wish someone would tell me what to do. I'm a bad boy. No one can control me, but I wish someone would control me. And she's like, I will. He's like, fuck out of here. No, you won't. And she's like, no, I will. And then long story short, he wakes up with a cage on something on him, and he can no longer use it until he acts right. And he has to live with that for a little while. And he falls really hard and he realizes that he's not good at making his own choices and he
Mhm.
needs someone to guide him.
Ah.
Yeah. And like, yeah, And like if he acts like, oh, it's like the relationship is like a little toxic, but like it's just so good. Like it's so good. And then the first book in the series, I left it for last on purpose. I
Mhm.
literally worked my way up from book three to one. Number one, I do not recommend very often. I mentioned it a few times on the podcast. It's my guilty pleasure book because if I try to describe it, it sounds crazy, but it's so good. It's called All My Love,
Oh, my love.
and it's the youngest sister in the group, and she's like in her like early 20s, and she's an artist, she's a painter, and she this is the first book I've ever read that has the same energy as like I'm obsessed with you, you're mine, I met you at first sight, and like it's been us, it'll always be us.
Mm.
You know what I mean? With
Okay.
last name, it's our last name. This is the same
Ooh.
energy, but female
Okay.
character. She has that energy. So if you've ever read like Haunting Adeline, or you've read
Hmm.
like romantic books where the guy is very like possessive from the jump, you're like,
Hmm.
where does he get this energy? This is her.
Okay.
This is the female version of her. Okay, so um she meets her next door neighbor. He's a single dad and he's like a farmer, and he like cares for the cattle on his land, very like Yellowstone vibes.
Okay.
He's supposed to look like Henry Cavill. That's what he's described as looking like.
Mm.
And he has a younger son. His wife ended up leaving him. He bought all this land for her. She's like, I don't want it anymore, and she leaves. And the female main character, she has always loved him. She's always had a crush on him. She babysits his son. She like when he leaves the house, they're next door neighbors. She goes into his house when he's gone. And she'll be like, he had coffee, he did this, he did that. She's obsessed with him. Like she knows she's obsessed with him. And she's like, I'm just really passionate. I'm not crazy. I'm just
Really
super passionate.
passionate.
I'm just super passionate. And then, long story short, his sister tries to set him up with another woman, and she like sees them from like she like goes to the pancake house and she sees him and he doesn't want to be on a date with this woman. But his
Okay.
his sister begged him to do it. She's like, it's time. He goes and gets breakfast with this woman. He's like, oh, I don't want to. And he like puts his fork down, he like walks away. The main character grabs the fork, plunges it into the girl's tire, and she's like, he's mine. He will always be mine. I was like, girl, oh, and he's like low key falling for her already, like the main
Okay.
character, but she doesn't know. And she's like, God, this is taking so long. And he ends up finding out about her obsession and like they discuss it and stuff. But at one point, he's like, God, I feel like someone's watching me. Nah. And she's got her binoculars on and she's like
Oh
watching
my
from next door. And she's like, I wonder if he'll ever realize it was me.
God.
And then he ends up finding out that the girl's tire was like punctured. And the best part is the main character's two sisters from book 2 and 3 know about her obsession. They've known for a while. And they're like, we'll help you. We're here for you. But you do have to tell him at some point. And he
Yeah.
does need to like want you back. And she's like, that won't be a problem. That won't be a problem. And then like long story short, she like I imagined her as like Sabrina Carpenter because she's supposed to be like
Okay.
blonde, short, very like all Americana, but her mind, like the way she thinks about things is so fucked up. But she adores his son. She never crosses any boundaries with that. And
Mm.
long story short, she ends up getting what she wants, but she has to communicate with him. And it's like
Mm.
the way they end up coming together and like discovering their relationship and their dynamics is wonderful. The spice is divine. He ends up having feelings for her, and he's like, "This is so wrong. I'm like 4 years older than you. It's so wrong." And she's like, we're meant to be.
Right.
Marry me. What? And like it's so like and the author is so like self-aware, but when I tell you
Mm.
this is one of the spiciest taboo series I've ever read. For the girls who are like, nothing can bother me, read this series and come back. Hold my beer. If you read this series and you don't clutch your pearls one time, okay, like I will buy you a book. If you could read this whole series and not clutch your pearls one time, I'll buy you any monster romance you want. If you could read this whole series and you don't blush one time, I'll buy you a book.
Well, I
I'll
was
buy
already
you a book.
blushing as you were talking about it,
Bro,
so
if you
probably
could
wouldn't
read
work.
this whole series without blushing, I will buy you a monster romance, no questions asked. Readers, hear me. Listeners, hear me. If you guys can read the Twisted Sister series and not blush or kick up your feet at any point, giveaway will happen. You know what I mean? Chelsea, I will get you a book if you can read this whole series. It's all on Kindle Unlimited. If you can read this whole
Okay.
series without blushing, I will get you a book. I will. That's how confident I am. People cannot read this series and not blush. I'm even for the seasoned girlies who are like, I am spice level 3000. Girl, this is 5000. I don't
Oh
think you're
no.
ready. You know, it is so, so good.
Okay,
But
Twisted
yes, book 3
Sisters.
definitely surprised me with like the true crime. Like,
Mm,
what do you
mm-hmm.
mean she unalives people? I was surprised because she's the most wholesome out of all the girls.
Mm.
But bro, she's like, I don't just want one. I'm gonna have them both.
I
And they
mean, why
both will be
choose?
mine. Like, why choose? That's book 3. Book 2
Okay.
is like he's a baddie. I'll make him act right. That's book
Right.
2. And book 1 is like, he's mine. I'm not
No
crazy, I'm
questions asked.
passionate. Like when book 1 girl gets upset and she gets angry, she literally like destroys her art studio. And he
No.
comes to her and he's like, "What's wrong? I heard yelling and there was a fire and like your foot is bleeding." And she's like, "Oh, there was a spider and I tried to hit it and like glass fell and like my foot's like cut." Then he looks around the corner and you just see her art studio is like broken apart because she saw him like flirting with someone else. She thought he was flirting with someone else and she was like, "Give me 2 minutes." She disappears and then she like breaks everything. This like 5'2"
Oh
blonde
my
girl like
goodness.
And he comes back and he's Henry Cavill and he's like, "Oh, what happened to you?" And she's like, "I need to go to the hospital. Can you take me? Hey, what's the
Oh,
passcode to your phone? It's your birthday. How did you know that?" I don't know. I don't know. I'm a hacker. That's just like she literally is like she
oh
can hack and like find all his
no.
stuff. And he calls his best friend. He's like, her passcode to her phone is my birthday. And his best friend's like, sounds like a passionate woman to me. I'm like, sir. His best friend is like,
Oh
his
wow.
best friend is his brother-in-law, and
Okay.
he's like, yeah, your sister. I'd crawl on glass for her, no questions asked. What? And he's
He
like,
sounds a
bro,
little
is this
unhinged
crazy? He's
too.
like, not to me. I'm happy here. You know that meme where it's like he's well fed, he gets sunlight, he's
Yeah,
fine.
he's
And the
fine.
guy's like in the corner like, I'm happy. I'm happy where I am, you know? Yes, he's the
Oh
equivalent
man.
of like submissive. Yes,
I love that.
100%. So I hope you read that series. I will check in on you. 2025, I
Okay.
will check in. If you read this whole series and you didn't blush one time, monster romance for you, like Oprah. You
Okay.
get one. You get one. Yes. So, yes, that was like honestly most of my questions for you. I think my last question for you is
Mhm.
going to have to be, huh, why did you start your blog?
Hmm.
And what is one of the most like important books to you that you want listeners to know about? That you're like, if they walk away with one book right now, you would want them to walk away with this book.
Okay. So why I started. Um, so life's been really busy. So I am a full-time teacher. So that takes up the majority of my time. But I'm also in grad school, and so that takes up the other half of my time. And so I was really trying to find like some kind of escape from reality. Like teaching's hard, school is hard. I need something that was just chill. And I've always been an avid reader. But in the last few years, I've picked it back up. And so I was like, okay, like I'm reading all these books I'd want to talk and discuss and like share. But more than that, I also really wanted to, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but it's not, I promise. I wanted to get off of social media, but
Mhm.
particularly with like people I know, which sounds really bad, but it's just
Yeah.
like, I don't think we need to be in each other's faces as much as we are. And so, just like my personal Instagram, I wasn't getting on it as much. I wasn't using it. It was just like, the people that I want to connect with, like, regardless of me being on social media all the time, like, I'm going to see them or I'm going to talk to them. And I also just like, I don't feel obligated to share so much of my life.
Hmm.
And so it was kind of like, okay, I do still want to like look at books and talk at books, but I want that to be a completely separate thing. And I just wanted to start like something new. Social media, as far as like influencing and like marketing, I'm not great at all, which I have no problems with. But I just wanted to have like a niche, I wanted to have something that I would keep up with and do. I've done the art Instagram situation. I've done when I worked as a photographer, I had that, but like I wasn't excited about it. It wasn't something that brought me like excitement or joy or passion. But this has been like so lovely just connecting with other bookish baddies, as I like to say,
Yes.
talking about our favorite books, exploring the tropes, figuring out ways to keep me involved with reading. Like for a while, I was like, oh, do I want a Kindle? Am I fine with just reading on my
Yeah.
phone? And now me and my Kindle are besties. She goes everywhere with me. Right
I
after
love my
this,
Kindle.
I'm about to go get a new Kindle sleeve for her because I don't want to just throw in her purse or my purse. But yeah, I just wanted a place to connect with other book girlies that was like low stakes. I didn't want to have to be posting about all my books on my personal Instagram for people that I know don't care. Like I wanted to just be surrounded by other bookish people. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was kind of why it started. And it's still morphing. I'm still trying to figure out particularly what I want to post. I had a pretty good like grid system set up for a while. And I'm like, I like this, but I don't know if it's like really what I want to do. I've been getting into reels now.
Oh,
In general, I don't think I like video myself enough or take enough pictures of myself in general. But I was like, okay, like maybe like I'm a blabbermouth. So like, getting on a video and like, this is a book that I'm reading and this is why I like it, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know. I just wanted to be able to have a community of bookishness again. Yeah.
I hear you. I think that I think that one of the reasons that like Bookstagram is such a safe space, and I feel like we've really incorporated that, is because the people you allow on your blog, the people you allow to see your book picks, I love your reels, may I add. Like I love you talk about books. I adore it. The beauty of the podcast, like we can go as long as we want. I'm gonna talk about
Mm-hmm.
books as long as we want. And I always feel like you can put us on in the background. You can listen to this while you're driving your car or, on lunch break or even just on a Saturday when you're like doing your laundry or, you're coloring to de-stress. Like
Mm-hmm.
books can bring such a level of comfort and reassurance that in real life you don't always get. Like you can see when people are like you're talking about something that you're really passionate about and they're like low key disconnected and you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I can tell you're not really into this." Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Versus like you can go to Barnes& Noble with a good friend and you guys can literally geek out about all these books you wish you could get and like these characters and these romances and the spice and like it's a safe space. And I love how your blog really highlights a joy and an enthusiasm and a passion for reading. And
Mm.
I can tell that you're very artistic and creative. And I hope that everyone follows your Instagram and I will link it below because it's such a creative and fun space. And I find so much joy in it. I know the
Thank
listeners will
you.
too. So, yes, I hope that you blab and you discuss all the things because as a fellow Taka, it's fun. It's fun to be joyful and passionate and
Yeah.
like don't tone that down for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like raise the ish up, like raise the volume. Like why am I the only one like backing it up in here? You know what I mean? Like, and that's how I feel about a good book. Like it makes you like, why am I the only one like vibing right now? Like you guys
Yeah.
just don't know. You're not on my vibe right now, and that's okay. And that's okay. You know what I mean? So I just love your blog. I could talk about it all
Thank
day. And
you.
I'm happy that you came on the podcast. And yes, what is the top book that if you had to tell everyone, like walking away, this is the
Oh my God.
moment, what is that book where you're like, please just read it? Like, I highly recommend going into 2025 because,
Let's see.
yes, everyone's adding books to their TBR right now for the new year. And I'm like, low key, there's already books out that like nobody's really talking about. They're like super good. Kimberly Lemming. Oh my God, Christina Forrest.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So
yes.
I do have one. Okay, so um plug but not a plug. Pages and Playlists, they're a book box subscription. And I did just recently like pause my subscription, but I listened to this audiobook and then I saw that this was the book that they were like giving out. But Bride by Ali Hazelwood, it's the only Ali Hazelwood book I have written, or what's that written? Ghostwriter. It's the only Ali Hazelwood book I've read. But it is literally so good. It's kind of enemies to lovers, but not really enemies. It's vampires versus werewolves, but like that's the only enemy that there is. Like they're not enemies to each other. But it's like a marriage of convenience. She the main character's name is Misery, which is insane. Like, why would you name that baby girl Misery? But she's looking for her human like sister who goes missing. Locke is the alpha of the pack who she marries, and it's this whole thing. He is essentially has like stepped up into this father role for his little sister. It's just so good. There's so many things about this book that I really loved. They just had to like kind of grow into each other and like learn to trust each other in a way that was just like really sweet. And again, it's like the slow build, the build up, like building trust, building a good foundation. And then just two characters that just want like the best for each other and those around them. So this is a good one that I suggest people need to read. I know all the other Ali Hazelwood books are really popular, but this one is really great. And then another one, which is going to sound wild, it's kind of a throwback. Midnight Sun, which is the Edward perspective of the Twilight books. It is so good. It's so good. I haven't read it in a really long time. Not a really long time. It's maybe been like 2 years, but I've definitely reread it before. And it's just such a great, like, for me,
Hmm.
Twilight was really what like I've been reading since I was little, but Twilight was the first. Well, Harry Potter. But anyway, Twilight was my first like books, and like you have to get the new one as soon as it comes out. And it's this whole
Wow.
phenomenon, and like, oh my gosh. And so like Midnight Sun is like a fun perspective on the Twilight series, which most people love. And so if they haven't gone into that one, like you gotta read it because it's really interesting hearing and seeing how Edward was feeling throughout that whole process.
Wow. My girlfriend actually read that book and I saw her like reading through it and she's a huge Edward fan and she was like, "Damn, Edward, like he was like watching her this whole time." I'm like, "I thought we knew that." She's like, "No. No. Like we know how he was really like tell me how you really feel." Like that's
Yeah.
how Edward was. I was like, "Dang." I love that you mentioned Midnight Sun because I'm actually a huge fan of The Host by Stephenie Meyer.
Mm.
That was my first like big book that I remember reading as a young adult where I was like let's say 17, 18. It was the first book I read that was very large. I would walk around with it all the time and just reread it. It was my mom's copy. I would reread it
Mm.
so often, like the cover got soft, and it was the hardcover. I took the sleeve
Oh,
off, and I read it so many times. I felt the cover getting like soft because I
oh
was
wow.
constantly walking around with it.
Mm.
And that follows the host is hard to describe. It follows a human person who during an alien, the aliens are already on Earth. They've already taken
Mhm.
over, and they look like humans, but they've taken over human bodies, and the ring in their eyes like a silver color, and that's how you can tell if they're alien or not. And they're like little light like in the book they're kind of like light jelly things, and they go into your body. They put them in your body, and they take over your body, and they sound like a voice, and they take over the human voice, and it's just the alien voice and the personality and they end up taking a body of a human who is like a kind of trying to escape and trying to survive with her little brother. She's a falling in love with the guy. She's her own life. They end up taking her body. She sacrifices herself, thinks that she died. She did not. Her body's still alive. They put the alien host inside, which is nicknamed Wanda. And Wanda's voice and the human voice, the entity, they're sharing a body. Different
Mhm.
personalities, different lovers, different goals, different feelings, but the alien Wanda inside of her is more empathetic and she feels so much and she has such
Mhm.
compassion for humans. And you see that a lot of the humans are it, that was one of those books that I read that made me realize like the power of perspective.
Mhm.
And it was one of those the first books that I ever read where Stephenie Meyer, I knew her as the author of Twilight. When I read The Host, it felt like a different person. Like I felt like an
Yeah.
entirely different person. That was the first book I ever read where I was like, what would it be like to have to look at someone and not judge them by their actions but by their words and their feelings and judge them as a whole person.
Mhm. Mhm.
There was something about that that was so powerful to me, and like how would an alien feel love if they've
Mhm.
never heard the word love, they don't know the action of love, it's an action. How would they experience love? And the way she described love is like molten like rock and lava. She could feel his love like transforming who she was.
Mhm.
I was like, oh my God.
Oh.
Like that was one of the best like depictions of a slow burn, really
Mm.
earning love, really like learning about a person and who they were on the inside. Wow. I'd never read a book like that before. And you mentioned Stephenie Meyer and I'm like, I did read the Twilight first book, but I remember reading The Host and I was like, oh my God, like she's a like that was such a good book.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'll always remember that chapter where she describes like having to let someone go that she really cared about and like the weight of a soul, like to love someone's
Ooh.
soul versus just the body. Oh my God, it was so good. So yes, I highly recommend it. So your books, if you to walk away right now, would be Bride by Ali Hazelwood and then Midnight Sun by Stephenie Meyer. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool. And I see a pattern here because Edward is technically a monster because he's a
Oh yeah.
vampire. And then Midnight Sun, we have a wolf and a vampire.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, my favorite book is Dracula. And actually one of my friends just got me a copy for my birthday. Oh wait, that's
Ooh.
my Frankenstein. Frankenstein's my other favorite book, but just got a new
Oh
copy
my
of
gosh, that
Dracula.
copy is so
And
pretty.
it's so pretty. But yeah, no, these are yeah, I'm a even in the classics, I'm falling for the monsters.
Ooh. So I bet you've seen Nosferatu.
It was so good. It was so good. It was so
You could never
good.
please me like he could. All of us were like, oh my God.
So I know that you asked me my last question, so I won't get into it, but I have very strong thoughts, opinions takeaways from Nosferatu versus the original source material Dracula, because while it is essentially the same, they're different. And that's too much for us to get into right now. Maybe I'll start the
Listen,
podcast
maybe
and
another
we'll start that.
episode. You know what I mean? Also, like I've been wanting to do an episode about my favorite vampire books and like the best
Ooh,
renditions of vampires, not only just contemporary, but also like black vampires, sapphic vampires,
Blade. Oh,
poly vampires. Like, yes, there's a book I really want to read. It's right here. I'm a huge fan of this author. It's S.T. Gibson, Dowry of Blood. Speaking of
ooh.
Dracula, Dowry of Blood follows the wives and partners of Dracula,
Mm-hmm.
and he's multiple. And I know in the original text he had, what was it, three
Three
wives?
wives. Mm-hmm.
And this one, I believe he has wives, but I also think he has a male partner as well. I
Mm.
don't know if they're married. I haven't read this book yet. But S.T. Gibson also wrote An Education in Malice, which is the retelling of Carmilla. And I
Mm-hmm.
loved An Education in Malice, and I also love the original Carmilla. So I'm excited to read A Dowry of Blood. If you haven't read
Ooh.
it, I hope you do. Maybe we can talk about it. But
Yes.
I've always been interested in Dracula's wives. I've always
Yeah.
wondered about their backstory. I love learning about the partner of the big bad. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I've always wanted to know,
Mm-hmm.
like, what would it be like to be married to someone that old and someone that prolific?
Yeah.
And also the first chapter of this book is a letter to Dracula from his wife saying how she knew at some point she was going to have to murder him.
Mm.
And it's in past tense. And I was like, ooh. So yes, it's not that long. It's not a super long book.
Okay.
But yeah, I hope that's one book I would recommend you. I hope you read it. Have you read
Okay.
it yet?
I have not read that one. That one's on the
Yes.
list, and then also Lucy Undying is on my list. I'm a paperback girly, so a lot of books that just come out with hardback first, like Lucy Undying, I'm like waiting for paperback. Same with Immortal Dark, waiting for the paperback.
So I have Immortal Dark. I have this Ravenous Fate. That was the box set from Jay's house. That was the box
Mm.
that I got two hardcovers for like I think it was like around 30 bucks, maybe 30, 40 bucks. I had the hardcovers. I love a hardcover. I take the beautiful shiny part off, and then
Hmm.
I read the hardcover, and then I put the shiny part back on because my oils from my hands I feel like will like get on the plastic, and
Yeah.
it gets to me. But yes, I would love to do a episode all about like vampires and vampire romance. Even
Yes.
just discussing our favorite vampire movies, shows,
I
like
would I would so be down.
yes, yeah. Also, who doesn't love a good vampire? You know what I mean? Or a
Hmm.
wolf. I love a good werewolf story.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm not sleeping on you. I love a good werewolf story. I do want to read Bride. I've wanted to read it for a while, and I have another book by Ali Hazelwood, which is Deep End.
Hmm.
And I heard it was gonna be called Wet for a
Yeah.
while, or like Splash, and I was like,
Yeah.
dang, girl. But I have an arc of Deep End, and I can't wait to read it. The
Okay.
only book I've read from her is The Love Hypothesis, and I was not a huge
Okay.
fan.
Mm.
I was not a huge fan. So like
Yeah.
I need I need more.
Yeah.
More. I feel like the guy from Star Wars where he's like, more. And that's what I need. I need more spice, I need more plot. So I'm
Okay.
hoping that Bride gets it for me. And you're hyping it up. You're hyping it up.
I,
This
I
is
enjoyed it, so
yes. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can
yes,
everyone
of
find
course.
you?
So Instagram, Princess Peach Reads. It's PRNCSS, and then regular Peach underscore reads. And then I'm also on TikTok. Same Princess Peach, but it's 444. But yeah, mostly on Instagram. Like, come find me. Let's hang out. Let's talk. Let's chit chat. Let's get bookish.
Yes, I'm gonna add your Bookstagram to a link in the story, like the show notes below. So I'll add the Bookstagram and your TikTok. And this is gonna be chapter one of Books for the Soul. So each episode of Books for the Soul will be a chapter with each person. And I'm just so grateful you were here. Thank you for coming to the
Yes, thank you,
podcast.
Alyssa.
And we'll do that vampire episode.
Heck
Listeners,
yeah.
it's coming this year because you know what? We need a vampire episode and we need a werewolf episode. So I'm totally down. So have a great
Yes.
day. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
coming on the podcast.
Alyssa. Bye.